I'm so glad to be here, and I know my friend and cohort is
Yes.
also really glad to be here. So we're going to talk a little bit about the experiments that we've been running, and this data is fresh, as in yesterday we were still talking about new things, so you're going to see it pretty much for the first time. We've never talked about it before.
Yes. So we've been working together over the past year to do a few different experiments, and I'm just going to start off when the slides come up just telling you a little bit about Wattpad. I think there's still a lot of misconceptions in the publishing industry about what Wattpad is and how we can work together. So Wattpad is a Toronto-based startup. We are a social network for readers and writers to connect and share stories. We are primarily a user-generated platform, so it's very similar to sites like Instagram or YouTube where anyone can join and upload their content for others to see. And like those sites, there are far more people who are reading than are contributing and writing those things. So I think it's a huge opportunity to get in front of so many readers. In fact, we currently have 25 million monthly readers that are joining the site. Our users are highly engaged. Their average session lengths are about 30 minutes at a time. We're seeing 2 million uploads every month and 8 million comments. I think that one of the primary misconceptions that we hear a lot is that Wattpad is a teen writing site, and I think, again, to stress that there are far more readers than writers. We see, exponentially more readers than our writing community.
And it's much broader than just teens, right?
Absolutely, that was going to be my next point.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, please. That's
you can definitely tell we're doing this together in harmony.
That now 35% of our user base is 18 to 30 as well. So we are growing into older demographics. That's definitely shifting a lot of the types of content that we're seeing become so popular as well. That's okay. That's fine. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
So this is just kind of a few of those stats.
So I'm just going to talk for a moment, and I'm going to be very brief about kind of what Sourcebooks is, but the more important thing is how many of you are publishers in the room? If you work for a publisher or in the publishing business somehow? Okay, there's a fair number. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about how I ended up in this relationship. So we at Sourcebooks have been evolving a lot. As you guys can tell, in 2005 we were primarily an adult. This is adult nonfiction, and in 2012 we were much more than that. And actually last year, more than 50% of our business was children and fiction. Last year was an incredible year for us. Our revenue was up 22%. It had a lot to do with the kinds of experimentation that I've been doing. I think that you need to know that we've done, in the past 5 years, we've done over 100 experiments with lots of different partners, and that's the point of view we have. Fundamentally, and this is a slide from my friend Kristen McLean at Bookagy. Some of you are going to know her. But this is her description of what is sort of the classic problem that we in book publishing are involved in, right? So that our problem is that the model that we're using was actually, and I see Brian in the audience, our model was actually developed to process and distribute objects and not to process and distribute information. And when you put in sort of the ability to distribute information in different ways, all of these intermediaries get, in fact, disintermediated in lots of different ways. And so we now have sort of a situation where you don't need all of those layers. And in fact, Wattpad is a great example of people writing directly to their readers. I mean, that's what they do. They post it one day and they have readers the next, right? That's pretty much what occurs.
Yeah.
So I just want to talk about kind of what and I'm going to just do it like this. This is fundamentally what I believe at this point. So I'm about 5 years into an evolving model, and I think this is the first time I've said this publicly. I don't believe that we are any longer just in the business of creating books, text-based books. I think we are now in the business of taking creative content partners and amplifying their reach, either their reach in terms of marketing or their reach in terms of revenue. And that we do that with retailers, but we also need to do it directly with readers. And the argument I've made consistently, and I think has now been fairly well borne out both with the work that we're doing with Wattpad, but in lots of other work as well, is that by having that direct connection to readers in a lot of different verticals, and those readers are different in every vertical, you end up understanding and acknowledging their differences. And once you start understanding their differences, you will start evolving new kinds of approaches to that content and to your marketing. So it's really about creating better revenue channels and better marketing channels for your creative content partners. That's kind of fundamentally what we've been working on. And it, by the way, is also a good thing for retailers. So I'm going to talk about, so this is some of the experiments we've run. So Shakespeareans and College Countdown and Discover, and obviously Wattpad, which is what we're going to talk about in length. And we own a company now called Simple Truths for business books. But I'm just going to give you an example from Put Me in the Story for just a second. So Put Me in the Story, personalized picture books, basically, right? That you can buy off of putmeinthestory.com. Those books are also available in non-personalized forms at every retailer in the country in the US. So last fourth quarter, in December, we sold something like 40,000 copies of a single picture book on Put Me in the Story. Okay, so 40,000 copies of a picture book. To do that, we actually did a tremendous amount of marketing. Here's what happened. Not only did we sell for this author a personalized version of this book, which was completely new revenue, right? There was no revenue there before, right? But in addition, her sales at brick and mortar retailers went up 63% because we were doing all this marketing, right? So the marketing itself gave customers a real understanding, a real feel for her, and they bought the book either on Put Me in the Story or through our traditional retail channels. And that's what I mean about kind of going full circle. In every one of our verticals, and I'm just going to give you some data here, in every vertical, we are now going to have partners that help us to think about the reader in new ways and to amplify the work that our retailers are doing so that we help them to better connect with their readers. Okay? So this is ebook sales. We tipped in fiction about 2 years ago. Okay, so about 2 years ago, our fiction sales were over 50% digital. And you can see kind of we have nonfiction, we have kids, we have YA, and in every one of those areas, you're going to see us develop relationships like we're developing with Wattpad so that we're thinking about it in new ways and really amplifying what our retail partners and what our authors are doing. And that's, I think, the value, part of the value that a publisher can add. So now let's talk about what we did.
Yeah, so we had
I just wanted to give you that, guys, for frame, because I know that not all of you are publishing YA, which is what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, so we really looked at it in the YA genre first. You know, we're very strong with teens and with teen readers, and we'd looked at kind of two themes and how we could work together. One was taking some of our native celebrities, people that had started writing off on Wattpad that had achieved followings of, you know, over 100,000 users, and how can we bring them something that they want? Because we were seeing lots of comments about, you should publish this, I would love to buy this and to read this. So we highlighted kind of two titles that we would like to go forward with that on, with Sourcebooks, that were very much in line with how they approached YA.
Right, and actually, just so you guys know, there are different models being used here. So, so Sourcebooks is the, God help me, for lack of a better word, traditional partner. But as you guys probably know, we're not a traditional publishing shop. But you know, we were the people representing, have the ability to have both print and digital books. But other authors also in the same model chose to self-publish. Others went in digi-first kinds of ways. So we've got kind of a breadth of data to understand kind of how this works.
Yeah. And then the other way that we were kind of approaching these experiments and what we could do was bringing some of Sourcebooks' biggest successes to the Wattpad audience to get our readers really excited and to build a community of Sourcebooks writers and traditional writers and bring them to Wattpad. And I think that through that experience, we learned a lot about what makes a Wattpad star, you know, how our native writers and native readers are behaving, and how we could teach that to traditional writers that were coming to the platform and engage in very native ways. And that kind of led us to a few themes and discoveries that we really want to talk about today.
Yes.
So the first bit is really in serialization. Right. So serialization is huge on Wattpad, and a big part of that is how the product was designed to be something that you didn't have to have your book finished before you started being a writer on Wattpad. It's really daunting to write a book. It's something that everyone thinks they can do. All of us that work in publishing are approached by, you know, friends and family that want to do that quite frequently and at parties. And it's quite daunting to write a book, but it's easier to write a chapter. And then once you have a chapter up, you begin to build an audience, and you begin to get comments, and people begin to ask you what happens next. And when you have that audience waiting for you, it's very motivating to continue and to write the next chapter and to continue on with that serialization. And on Wattpad, as a mobile platform, we provide push notifications. So when you're following a writer or a reader, or sorry, a writer or a story, every time they update that story, you're getting notifications right to your device that this has been updated, a new chapter has been added, and you can go right into that and read it. So 85% of our platform is mobile, and when we were looking at the numbers, we know, 90% of our users are only readers, 10% are writers. We had assumed that that 10% is probably people that are writing. That's probably a lot of our web visits, but 50% of our posts of stories to Wattpad are coming from mobile devices.
And for those of us who are publishers, we really want to think about that people are writing on mobile devices. We're seeing that a lot in China and Japan, where people are writing on mobile devices, and certainly in other places as well. But here you're really seeing a very native community where the writing is occurring. And I suspect that also the reading spurs the writing, right? So you read something and you say, oh, I could do that too, right? And that's kind of how, the virality of it, part of the virality of it might work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's a big difference between serial writing, which is kind of, people posting it as they go, and serial distribution, which was the way that we had approached a lot of writers that had written stuff outside of Wattpad that were bringing it to the community. We thought we should take advantage of a lot of this native behavior in serialization to post it in that kind of way of a little bit at a time and a chapter at a time, to take advantage of those push notifications. Because unlike, a traditional giveaway that happens in a lot of different places, someone might take it, add it to their e-reader, and it's kind of, how often are they reminded of that, especially when they have large libraries. But by, adding a little bit each time, you're reminding someone with each post that, come back to join this conversation with this author and join with this reading. And something else interesting happened along that serial distribution, and that was when someone doesn't have another chapter to read, what do you want them to do? And it's a great opportunity for a call to action. We started calling something in the office the Candy Crush effect, because people were posting every week on Wednesday or Thursday or whatever day they had chose to post, and they would end it with messaging such as, you can wait until next Wednesday for the next chapter, or this book is available to purchase, at these different retailers. And we were seeing, yeah.
And it's one of the things that's really interesting is, I'm not sure, how many people in the room have had a book read more than 1 million times? Anybody? Okay, so Miranda Keneally, we posted Catching Jordan. I was what I was doing with my iPad was actually trying to get you the completely right number, but I believe what we talked about yesterday was like 1.8 million reads, or 1.4 million reads, or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, so when you're looking at these numbers and when you're looking at this audience, you're talking about extraordinary kinds of numbers, okay? Kind of, sort of much larger than we're used to when we talk about, oh, I've sold, 1,500 copies of this book and I'm really excited, which, by the way, sometimes I get really excited about that. I publish poetry sometimes, so, yes. So go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that call to action as well, it can be other things as well. If you're enjoying this, you can read this review over here, or even writers that are asking their readers, what did you think about this, and getting people to respond in the comments. It's a great opportunity for conversation when there isn't that next chapter to immediately jump into. There's a great opportunity to direct your readers to things that you'd like them to do. Which is also part of, I think, the other big theme about Wattpad is social reading, which I know came up a lot as well when Clive was talking earlier. And I think that, again, I think it's really optimized through serialization, because it becomes a more social activity because everyone's reading it at the same time. When you're bringing your audience through chapter by chapter, there's much more discussion that's happening because you're all at the same place. You're all waiting for the next chapter. No one has kind of advanced information than other readers. And we've just recently introduced inline commenting into our app, and it's already amazing how much that's elevated the discourse. It used to just be that readers could comment on the chapter as a whole at the end of the chapter. Now they can comment on a particular line that a character says or a particular plot twist, and we're seeing much more emotional reactions to things rather than, the same kind of blandness of comments at the end of chapters that were discussed earlier.
So social reading, it's been around for dozens of years. It really has. It has been seriously experimented with probably for the last 7 to 8. Up to now, we've never seen anything actually work to the extent that we define work in terms of social reading. In fact, when Clive was talking about it, I thought, the guys who were doing this is Kobo, and I don't know, have people used the Kobo commenting, functionality that's embedded in Kobo? No, not a lot? Okay. So I've been trying to read Moby Dick for probably 25 years, and I thought, oh wow, I should definitely try Kobo on this because here it is, I can see how other people got through Moby Dick. I just want you to know that you just need to open Moby Dick and you'll discover that the comments don't help you at all, okay? And here's the problem, and we at Sourcebooks also tried a bunch of experiments on that. So we did, we did a book with David Houle that we did in a social reading format. We did Jason Murkowski's book in a social reading format. We've tried stuff on Bookshout. We've tried a lot of these experiments. And what we haven't tried is we haven't tried ReadMill yet. But I have to tell you, the comments tend to not be as engaged, and they tend not to be as deep, and they tend not to be as helpful as will help you to actually have that conversation. When you look at what these guys are doing, you see the kind of commenting that actually does not only drive the conversation forward, but I suspect drives the writer to want to do more, right? Which is actually kind of a very, sort of self-propelling methodology.
Yeah, and I think that above all, Wattpad is a social network. That is the aim of what we're doing. That's how we see ourselves and what our strategy is. And I think that also really affects a lot of these actions too, because anytime someone chooses to make a comment in these stories, everyone that's following them sees it as well. So the audience really has an audience now too. So by encouraging these calls to action at the end of serialization and asking people, what do you think, and creating these comments, you're really creating much more of a viral effect, because with every comment that's made, everyone that's following them will also see it, and it drives even more attention and traffic back to that story that's posted.
Well, the thing that I think is most interesting is that we, as we mentioned, we are publishing, I think they come out in next week, right?
March 1st, they just came out.
The first 2 books, and what was really interesting was when you were editing them, it was so clear that the writer got much better as they went on, because they got feedback from their audience as they were writing, right? So they got, the end of the books are much stronger than the beginning of the books as people are learning how to write.
Absolutely, and I think that they get more confidence too when they suddenly realize they have an audience. Something that we hear when we talk to so many of these native Wattpad celebrities is that they didn't think of themselves as writers. They started out reading, they were seeing the other comments and the other postings, and they just started writing themselves. And then when there are those comments and those people saying, this is the best thing I've ever read. And I really would flag that the comments on Wattpad are overwhelmingly positive too. People are very thankful. The messaging is always that, we are doing this for the Wattpad community, or this is, I'm posting this for my fans. And people love it. There isn't a lot of kind of critical comments. And especially for a young writer or someone that is finding their voice and learning how to write, I think it's extremely encouraging.
One of the things that we learned, by the way, in this process was our original instinct as publishers was, we're going to take these books and we're going to make them, we're going to make them more traditional books. We're going to sell them to people, so they're, as opposed to being free, they're going to now be paid for. And one of the conversations that we had pretty deeply between Wattpad and Sourcebooks was, should we take the original stories down? And that was a conversation that went on for quite a while as we began to understand kind of how that might or might not work.
Yeah, and I think that part of that came from involving the fans in it. It's something that we've seen before. There have definitely been acquisitions of some of these Wattpad celebrities in the past, and the traditional behavior we would see was that someone would come in, offer them a book deal, and then have the work removed. And particularly when you're talking about YA, when you're talking about how long the publishing process can sometimes take, you've purchased the rights to that because it has an audience and because it has this platform and there are all of these fans that are watching that writer. So to take that work down and to relaunch it and try to connect with that community again 2 years later, it's a really broken experience. And we've seen a lot of backlash from communities as well. And I think that was something that we really approached in the messaging of this and really making the fans feel responsible for the writer's success.
Right.
And that it is being published. Sourcebooks is publishing it because you guys have made it a success, because so many people have loved this story. You've allowed this writer to get this platform and to be noticed in this way.
So I think as publishers, we're having much more intense and very real conversations with readers than we've ever had before. And readers don't understand a lot of what we do. So they don't understand why the publishing process needs to take 1.5 years. They really don't. And a lot of times I feel like I'm a translator, like I live in both worlds and I need to explain on the tech side why it takes 1.5 years and on the, on the publishing side why it really needs to go faster, right? So both of those need to exist in the same world. And what was really interesting is that, having that conversation and getting that, okay, we're going to leave the original stories up, and then we're going to publish the edited version of the stories in these other new traditional ways. And we're going to put all of that into the same ecosystem, and let's see what happens now. Okay?
Yeah, and it was much more about doing something additive for the fans.
Exactly.
And giving them something that they wanted.
And something additive for the author, too.
Exactly. And we're even seeing as well from some of these writers, too, that have received these book deals where, it's a 3-book deal and they're now under contract. And for some of these native writers that learned how to write on Wattpad and they learned how to write on an audience, writing these, future drafts becomes much difficult for them when they're suddenly writing it on their own. And they don't have that constant feedback, and they don't have 1,000 people saying, after every chapter, this is the most amazing thing that I've read, and that encouragement as they go.
It's really interesting.
Yeah,
it's a really interesting set of developments. I mean, all of us are having conversations, with readers pretty much every day about things like rights and rights management. Like, why is it not available immediately when they publish it in the UK? Why don't I have it in the US? And why can't the US publisher sell it to me in New Zealand? I don't understand. So all those conversations are now getting more public, and there's a slight lack of tolerance, I would say, on the part of the reader about kind of why I can't have exactly what I want when I want it immediately wherever I am on whatever device I happen to be using.
Yeah, and I think that a big part of that and a big part of how Wattpad's working for a lot of writers that are coming to Wattpad is to build an audience and to find those super fans that do want more, and to create a different model, which Dominique's always been great at. I remember one of the times you were at Tech Forum and we were talking about this last night, the baby name book, and about how it can be all of these different things, and it's the deluxe edition and it's the paperback edition, and there's room for free
and we need
editions.
to kind of think about, that's kind of what I was trying to draw your attention to. Now, Clive talked about the fact that books are becoming loci, and they actually have always been, and I totally agree. And in fact, on Wattpad, we talk about enthusiasts and superfans, and we talk about people wanting to do something once they've read a book. So Wattpad has developed some really interesting tools for people to actually express their love. And I have to tell you, it's something I think we as publishers need to do more of. Like, it's not just publishing the book, but like, how do we help you to express the fact that you love Janet Gertler? Like, okay, what do I do about that,
Yeah, I think that fan fiction is a huge part of that. We see a lot of fan fiction on the platform, and it's something that's become so exciting to see how that changes. We see people so immersed in the story that they're not happy to leave at the end. They want to know what happened to this, what happened after this character died, how did these other people move on with things, or in this scene we didn't see what happened to these other side characters. How did they react to this news? And just wanting to explore every thread that isn't explained in the story, and we're seeing that happen more and more. But what we've really been discovering as well is that it's not just fiction that people are writing to express this love. For a lot of these top Wattpad, Wattpad stars, we're seeing it go all over the internet. People that don't consider themselves writers but are really good at Photoshop are photoshopping scenes from the book on Instagram using photos of celebrities. We're seeing people make fan trailers for stories that they love, editing it into a sequence and putting it on YouTube. If you search for Wattpad across any of these social networks, you see so much of this fan-created art, even places where we weren't expecting it, like sites like Polyvore, where you can post outfits and fashions. People will post outfits, using real clothes and stories, like this is what the character's wearing, and come and see it there. Or on 8-Track, we're seeing people make entire, soundtracks that go along with stories that they like, and explaining, why they think that this best goes along with that.
Right, and you're seeing some developments in that space from people like BookTracks. I don't know if people know BookTracks, but those guys they're also working on fan communities, but they're using the ability to develop music to go along with the story, so you can develop a whole soundtrack for your ebook. And what I think you're going to see more and more is as big things become bigger, so as Hunger Games becomes bigger, whatever you're publishing today, as all of those things start getting more traction that we need to create methodologies for fans to actually share and express their affection for the book, the author, the character, and that's going to get into some very interesting and I suspect unconventional places in copyright. We're going to get to have some look. All of this is we're going to have some conversations we've never had before, and we're going to learn the nuances that exist in sort of these middle spaces. So it's going to get pretty damned interesting.
Yeah. So like Dominique said, the books that have recently come out they came out on March 1st. What we're already seeing in trends to that is the data of how I think the amount that people are visiting those writers' pages now on Wattpad has gone up about 10 times within the past week. People are really excited by the news, and they're flipping it back to the fans' responsibility, like, to help me make this a success. If you can't buy it, leave me a review, or tell your friends how much you liked it.
And we did see some enormous good. I mean, if you go to the pages, the Goodreads reviews and we've seen enormous reviews pre-publication, which were really interesting, and that was kind of new.
Yeah, debut novelists launching their titles with 1,200 reviews on Goodreads, with 4.7 stars on that, and that interest already that's happening in the community. I think that people are really excited to see that and excited to see this thing, because I think they do feel like they're part of the success. They were part of the publishing process.
And it really is an experiment. I mean, we're putting the books out both in physical form and in digital forms. The accounts took them well in physical forms. I think they underestimated what these are going to do in physical forms, because I don't think they actually understand what it means to have a layer of fans at that level. But we're going to report all the data. Like, you're going to hear about it. You're going to hear, like, how many we sold in physical form, how many we sold, because we're going to learn together kind of. And that's what we're doing together, is we're going to learn kind of how this works, what works, what doesn't work, and how we can make it better.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways that we involved the existing fans of the work in the publishing process itself.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So we did a lot with the fans to allow them to feel that they were a part of the process. So Dominique has a funny story about the cover process too.
I'm used to being a traditional publisher. I mean, and that has some, as untraditional as I am, I still have some quirks I've got to get over, right? So we voted the covers, and they voted something, and we didn't like it. We went back to the drawing board, like literally 3 times, and came up with something we really loved. And my editor said to me, we have to re-vote it. And I, of course, said, oh my God, but what if they choose the one that they chose before? Now I've got to publish with that cover? That would be kind of horrible. And it was really awesome, because we voted it again, and they loved the new cover. They too got what we had gotten to, which was that we were not expressing the book correctly. But they couldn't articulate it. So it was really interesting. The role of a publisher in that process was like I could articulate the fact, oh, this cover doesn't do a good job, but they could also see when we got it right, so, or righter. Because I never know whether I've gotten it right.
Yeah, and straight from the beginning, when we first decided to publish this book, we allowed them to show interest by, purchasing things against that. Of did you want to be involved by helping to name a character, or helping choose what happens in a specific scene, to get people excited early on in the process.
Yep.
And that's kind of the end of this section. So if there's any more that we didn't get to.
So a couple of things that we want to say to you is, around mobile, if you don't have a mobile strategy today, which many of us in book publishing don't. We're really reliant on our retail partners for developing that strategy for us. We need to think about that. That's probably something you want to think about. And probably you also want to think about this concept of fan love. What can we do to really help people to express their love better? And there's some interesting stuff around serialization that we're seeing with Wattpad that we probably want to think about as well. Thank you very much.